Hi everyone, it's Gemma aka Jam Jar Sews and I'm here for another video with the lovely people at Bombay Stores Fabric. So as the weather's now warming up and we're getting some lovely sunshine, we thought it would be great to do a springtime dress project. So today we're going to be making the Burda Style 6758. As you can see from the pattern, there are multiple options, so you can either make one where you use the same fabric throughout, or you can make one where you use a contrast fabric. So with the theme of spring in mind, Bombay Stores Fabrics and I decided that we wanted to use a really lovely floral print for this dress. So I'm using this gorgeous cotton. It's got these beautiful red roses on this contrast black background, and I think this is going to look absolutely beautiful. So if you're interested in picking up some, head over to Bombay Stores Fabrics website. Also, you need lining fabric for this, for the bodice, which again, Bombay Stores Fabrics have a huge range of colours available. And then we need a 24-inch or 60 centimetres invisible zip. So again, you can get that from Bombay Stores Fabrics. For the front of your dress, we've got this very interesting piece. I think this relates to the panel in the front. And I think when we get started, we'll actually cut this dart out. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But you've got this long front piece, which has the bodice part and then a part of the skirt, and then we have a side front panel, so you cut two of those, and then the back is similar. So we've got kind of this long dress part including the bodice with this dart at the side here, and then a back side front piece as well, and these are all cut out in the main fabric. And then of course, no homemade dress is complete without pockets. So the pattern said to cut 2 pocket pieces out of the main fabric and 2 pocket pieces out of the lining. I've just cut all of mine out in the main fabric, but we'll see how that works at the time. And then lining pieces, it's just the bodice that's lined, so we've got the front and the back, and then this long strip. And as you can see, I've done all my notches and I've marked all my tailor's tacks, and you can go back to my video on making a shift dress if you want some tips and tricks on how to mark those up. But for now, we'll get started with sewing. Our first step is to sew our pockets into our front pieces. So this is my sort of front piece with the bodice and the skirt. You match the notches on your pattern pieces. So the notch on the main dress piece and then the notch on the pocket pieces, and you put the fabric right sides together. And we do one on this side and then one on the other side. And then we do the same thing with the front side panel. So we're just going to sew those on between this point and this point, making sure we back stitch at either end to make sure it's secure. And throughout this pattern, we're using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn all of your pocket pieces on, you should have something that looks like this. So this is one of my side front panels with the pocket sewn on. And then the next step is just with your iron to press your pocket piece away from your main bit of fabric. So the next stage of this pattern is quite interesting. So to do the front darts on the front bodice piece, we actually need to cut a section of the fabric out. So what we've done so far is we've marked our 3 dart points. So we've got one bottom point here, one bottom point here, and your tip here. So these are the lines that we'll be sewing along, but first we have to cut out a section in the middle. And that I think again informs a sort of panel piece. So to do that, to understand how to do that, I've basically stitched in my 3 points and then I've connected them just using washable chalk. Hopefully you can see the lines here. So this is the outside of the dart. And then it says that you need to start from a point that's 3 centimeters down from this top part of the dart. So I've marked here, again with a chalk pencil, where that 3 centimeters is. And then I've drawn a line down to here, to the edge of the dress, or the edge of this piece. So basically the line starts from the edge of this piece and goes all the way up here to 3 centimeters down. And then I've done the same thing on this other side. And then what we're going to do is cut out this small triangle here. So once I've cut that out, this is the edge here, and you can see I've cut 3 centimeters below that point, and then I've done the same thing on the other side. So our next step is then to pin our side front panel piece to our main front piece. So what you want to do is pin them at this short edge here, and you need to make sure that the pockets line up. So you want the pockets on your side front piece to be on the same side as the pockets on your main front piece. Next step after we've done that is to sew together the side front panels and the main dress along the long open edge. So we're closing that long open edge by bringing together the side front panels and the main bodice. Now we're going to start this stitching at the top of that dart point here to make our dart. We'll carry it on until we meet the first notch on the pocket pieces, and we'll back stitch there. And then we'll start again from the bottom notch on the pocket pieces, back stitch from there, and go all the way along to the hem. Sewing that long edge, you need to make sure that the pockets are poking in, otherwise you won't be able to turn them the right side. One thing to remember when you're doing that long stitch is you don't actually want to back stitch at the dart point, you just want to leave long threads so you can tie that together. So once you've sewn those long seams together either side, you should have your front piece now connected to your side panels. So we've got this bodice here and then going into the main skirt. Final step on the front is then to stitch the pocket pieces together. So basically you go around using a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and we're just going to stitch around the curve there, stitching up until where the line of stitching is where you've attached the side front panel to the main front panel. Once you've stitched around your pocket edges, there's an opportunity then to finish off all of your edges, and you can do that however you want: pinking shears, overlocker, zigzag stitch, it's up to you. And for now we're going to move on to the back. So again, for the back piece we have to clip in the dart. So I've done the same process of drawing the line between the tailor's tacks, which mark the top and sort of size of the dart, and then drawing in this smaller triangle to align with the edge here, and then this other side. Mine's come out very narrow. I think that's the way it's supposed to be because that's what the pattern markings indicate, but I felt the same way. And it seems like the gap between the kind of smaller triangle and this dart point here seems bigger than the seam allowance, but that's what the instructions tell us to do, so that's what we're going to do. Once you cut out your triangle, you'll have the split here, and then again we pin our side back panels to this short edge on the back. Okay, so then as per our front panels, we then stitch together along the long edge. So we've got our side panel here, and then our main bodice and skirt piece here. And we just stitch up to the top point of the dart. So it's now time to put in the invisible zip. I actually looked at mine on the back of the dress and decided that 60 centimeters was too long. So I've just shortened mine by 10 centimeters, and I've done that by adding some stitches to make sort of a shorter end to the zip rather than relying on the sort of like natural plastic fusing that they add. Okay, so for the invisible zip, the first step that you can do is to press it, so you kind of press the teeth out. I don't find that step to be necessary, so I'm not going to do that, but there's an option. And then I just open the zip out and I flip the zip tape around so that the kind of zip tape edge is lined up with the edge of one of my back pieces, and then the teeth are on the other side. And you just, first of all, you just pin that all the way down, leaving the zip open, and then we sew that in place using either a normal zip foot if you want, but I always use my invisible zipper foot because it makes it a lot easier. So once you've sewn in one side of the invisible zip, you can then just give it a quick test, which I always like to do, so that's running up smoothly. And if it's not, it might have been that you've stitched too close to the teeth in some places, and you might need to sort of undo it and redo parts of it. So just check. I've got my other back piece here, and I'm just going to take the zip and I'm going to flip it around like this. Again, line up the top of the teeth with the top of the bodice, and I'm just going to pin this in place and then sew it in as I did with the other side. Once you've got your zip in and you've tested it, you should have something that looks like this. So we can see we've got this nice invisible zip in place here. You can't really see any of the teeth poking out, and when you press this, you can kind of press the bits of fabric together if you do have any bits where it's poking out. So that's good. And the next step is then to do up this back seam. So we're just going to pin these two long open edges together on that back seam, and then you need to try and kind of match up the end of where you've sewed the zip in place with this line of stitching here. So when you're doing the line of stitching near the zip, I tend to switch to a zip foot here, just a regular zip foot, because then I find I can get closer to the line of stitching. So our next step is then to sew our shoulder seams together. We then sew our side seams in place, so we just pin all the way along the top part and the skirt, pinning the front pieces and the back pieces together, and we do that using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then after you've done that, it's probably quite a good time to try it on to see how it fits before we move on to the lining. So it's just the top half that's lined, and the first step for that is you have one front piece of lining and two separate back pieces. You can use whatever lining fabric you prefer, and the front piece has 2 darts in it and the back pieces have 1 dart each. And these aren't the same as the darts on the main dress where we have to kind of cut the fabric and then sew the dart. They're just regular darts. So you should have your 2 notches which note the bottom part, and then your single point here. So we're just going to stitch that in as we would a normal dart, stitching from the bottom here to the top. Next step is then to sew together your shoulder seams and your side seams. One thing you can also do with your lining pieces, this is in the pattern but I haven't done it, is to add interfacing around the neckline. And that's just, you add interfacing to stabilize. I'm quite happy with the weight of the lining and the weight of the dress I've already got. It was sitting really nicely, so I haven't done that step, but that is something that you can add onto here. And then in the pattern it says we need to then press with your iron just along this raw edge here to get a nice folded edge. It's then time to attach it to the main dress piece, and we do this by pinning it first around the neckline, matching the shoulder seams as best you can. So we pin all the way around the front neckline, and that's right sized together, so you should have the darts pointing towards you where you stitch those in, so that when we turn it out the darts are laying against the wrong side of the main fabric. Now when it comes to where it's meeting the zips, you're going to want to fold back your lining edge, so you're folding over this raw edge, and then you're going to pin that to the zipper tape. So you're going to sew all the way along across the zipper tape, but you're going to make sure that this edge of the lining is folded, otherwise you'll have a raw edge on the outside along the zip. So once we've attached the lining to the main fabric, we're then going to pin the seam allowance back towards the lining and we're going to understitch. So we're going to do running stitch really close to the main line of the fabric, the main fabric, but on the lining. You turn your lining to the inside, and I haven't pressed it yet, but I will then press it. And then for the armholes, this is quite different to lining I've done before, but my understanding is that we pin the raw edges of the armholes together and then we bind it afterwards. So for the moment, you're just going to pin the raw edges of your lining to the edge of your armholes and then stitch around that. Use these strips of lining to bind the armholes. I've never done this before. I've just tried it on the one side and it's a bit fiddly, so probably not my favorite method for finishing the armholes. So the first step is we've got our raw armhole edge here. We're going to fold this in half lengthways and press that, and then once we've done that you kind of open it up again, but you can still see where that fold was. And we're going to pin the binding to the raw edge of the armhole. Once I pinned all the way around the armhole, I then took the 2 loose ends, because your binding strip should be longer than the armhole, and I'm just going to stitch across here, and then I'm just going to fold this seam, I'm going to trim this seam allowance down and then sort of fold it to one side. Once we've got that short edge stitched down, we're then going to sew all the way around the armhole, not using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance this time. Actually we'll just stitch 1 centimeter away from the raw edge. Then going to understitch. So again we pin our seam allowance back towards the lining, and we're going to stitch really close to the main fabric but on the lining. Then you see that your bias binding kind of folds in really nicely. And now the next step is to kind of fold over the raw edge, fold it again, and so we're then going to stitch that piece down. So the next step I'm going to do with the lining is then just sort out the finishing with the zip. And I think in the pattern it says you can hand stitch it, but I think I'm going to just machine stitch mine down. So all I'm going to do is go along, fold this edge and stitch it to the zip tape and to the back edge of my fabric, but not go all the way down because we've got a pressed up edge at the bottom. And the final step I'm going to do, although it's not in the pattern, is then to top stitch around the neckline. So I've pinned back where the lining sits, and I'm just going to stitch 1 centimetre away from this raw edge here to secure that in place. And then our final step is to hem the very wide skirt at the bottom, and you can just hem however you want. I think the pattern recommends 3 centimetres or something, but you can obviously just try it on and then hem however you wish. And that's your dress done. Thanks all so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and you have fun making your own spring sundress. If you do decide to follow this video, please share your creations with us on Instagram at Bombay Stores Fabrics and at Jam Jar Sews. Thanks everybody, bye!